coming here, I've been able to reconnect myself in a way that I haven't since, I probably was a teenager. I've started to figure out who I really am when everything's taken away. People here do not care that I'm on television. They go, oh, that's cool, interesting, but they are not trying to get anything from you. They're not overly impressed by what you do. And so to be able to let go of all of that stuff, that persona that I had built up, it's made me able to find out again who I truly am. And I've felt a level of contentment that I never thought was possible.
A movement is underway of people abandoning the emotional, physical, and financial expenses of city living and crafting their own purpose, livelihoods, and joy in the rural reaches. The Urban Exodus podcast shares the wisdom, wit, and stories of those who decided to embark on the road less traveled to pursue their own interpretation of the good life. Small business owners, change makers, artists, farmers, and more, working towards building a better future for themselves and their fellow citizens. This podcast is for country dreamers, rural folk, and urban dwellers alike who want to feel more connected to the natural world and the purpose and choices in their lives. I'm Alyssa Hessler. Welcome to the Urban Exodus. I'm excited to invite you to my conversation with Alicia Malone. Alicia is a recent Maine transplant who moved from Los Angeles during the pandemic. Alicia was born and raised in Australia and is a writer, film expert, and most well known as a host on Turner Classic Movies. Her 2 books, Backwards and Heels and The Female Gaze, explore the role of women in cinema history and the accomplishments and struggles of female filmmakers today. As a child, Alicia spent a lot of time out in nature. She dreamed to one day be able to move to a place where she could reconnect with the natural world and have a slower pace of life. That one-day dream seemed like a much more viable option when the pandemic hit. Alicia works remotely, and every few months she takes a trip to film at TCM headquarters in Atlanta. She realized that there was nothing keeping her in the traffic, bustle, and party scene of Los Angeles. On a whim, she found a monthly rental in a small town in Maine that she'd only driven through once. A month into her move, and she knew that she'd finally found a place to call home. She planted permanent roots and was able to buy her first home. In our conversation today, we speak on so many things: moving to a small town on your own, strategies to manifest your dreams, the difficulties women face to be taken seriously in male-dominated industries, and so much more. This is a story of following your intuition, new beginnings, and the pursuit of happiness. I hope you enjoy it. All right, so I am really excited to have Alicia Malone on the podcast. I met Alicia actually at a COVID-friendly dinner party in Maine. And Alicia, you are a journalist. You are a film journalist, specifically kind of in the classic movie space. Mm-hmm. And you recently moved from Los Angeles to Maine, and you are a host for Turner Classic Movies, and you're able to do that remote. And when we met, we just had so much to talk about. And I think you're so interesting and have a lot of really wonderful perspectives on things. And so I'm just really excited to speak with you.
Thank you. Well, you missed out the part where I basically fangirled over you because I'd bought your book, Ditch the City and Go Country, and I recognized you from the cover of your book. So as soon as I saw you, I said, I think that's Alyssa. And then I was like, did you write a book? And I felt like such a little fan. But your book, we can talk more about it as we get into this, but it was so helpful for me when I moved over here. It gave me a real guide and so many wonderful tips. So thank you for that.
Oh, that's really sweet. I did not pay Alicia to say that. I will just say that first off. Let's just get right into it. I'd love for you to share a little bit of your personal backstory, where you grew up, kind of how you got into journalism, maybe how you got here, but you can keep it as short or sweet as you'd like.
Well, you can tell from my accent, people listening, that I'm not from America. I was born in Canberra, Australia, which is the capital of Australia, but it feels very much like a small town. And I grew up riding horses and out on the farm, and that was a great way to grow up. And I also loved movies, particularly classic movies. My dad and the rest of my family are big film buffs, and he showed me many films by classic film directors like Alfred Hitchcock. And then I really got into it in my teens, and I would go down to the video store, my little list of films I should watch if I wanted to be a film buff. And I would make my way through them. And I was never into going out and going to parties. It's just very shy and introverted, like many film lovers are. You know, you get to escape into someone else's world. And so when I graduated high school, I had the grades to go to university, but I decided not to. And I decided, instead of going into film, which I knew was just a long process, films take years. I didn't know if I had that patience. I wanted to work in television. So I moved up to Sydney, age 18. I started doing just a TV production course for something to do. There I met a girl who was working at Channel 7, this is one of the big TV networks in Australia. And very luckily, she recommended me for a job leading up to the 2000 Olympics because they were the host broadcaster. So I worked there for a variety of years, like on a variety of roles for many years. And then I started working at a movie cable network in Australia as a producer and editor. Thought I might like to host. Again, it was a woman who helped me, another host who said, I told her what I wanted to do. And she was, instead of saying, you're trying to take my job, she was like, let me help you. She gave me a real push, a real start in the industry. And then I decided in 2010 to pack it all in and move to LA, where I didn't know anyone. And I just wanted to be in the film world, and spent 10 years there with the specific goal of working with TCM because I love classic films. Didn't know if I was ever going to be able to do it, but I somehow managed it. And then last year, 2020, made my way over to Maine.
You talked a little bit about your foray into films and putting the pieces together that you wanted to be a film journalist. And I think being on camera, it's kind of different set of standards for women and men. And I wondered if you wanted to speak a little bit about your experience going on camera as a woman journalist versus a man journalist in that space.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride. You know, I started 2007 was when I first started being on camera. So I've been on camera now for 15 years or so, and 14 years. And throughout that time, it's been so difficult to hold on to who I am because you get so many comments from all different angles of how you should be, how you should look like, how you should act. You're told to fit into a certain mold, either explicitly or implicitly, and that includes your weight. I remember one of my first big jobs in Australian television was a live event, and I was so nervous, again, you know, being quite shy. I only wanted to be on camera because I wanted to talk to the filmmakers and be able to tell stories about film. I wasn't really wanting to be a public figure. And the male producer pulled me aside after that and said, you did really well. You've got great talent. If you just lose 10 kilograms, which is like, 5 to 10 pounds, then you could be really a star. And I thought, what? Like, why does my body have to do with the talent? And that's been something that has been present throughout my career. I've seen that with all other female journalists as well, that you not only have to look a certain way, but you have to be better than everyone else. I mean, it's especially hard for women of color as well, have to prove yourself more than your male colleagues. I'm constantly challenged on what I know or disbelieved for what I know. And it's a really difficult position because you're basically told that you should look like a model. But if you look like a model, then people really don't believe that you have authority or you know anything, because why would you bother being intelligent if you're pretty? Those two things is hard for people to believe. And being on camera, people feel very, very comfortable in telling you exactly how they think of how you look. Most of the feedback I would get throughout my career was not what I said and not what I was hired to do, which was to be a film expert. It was how I looked, the dress that I chose, how my hair was. It's hard not to lose yourself amongst all of that and start believing that there is everything is wrong with you and you need to fix everything. Especially I've learned not to read the comments on the internet. That's been a hard road.
Yeah. I mean, people feel so emboldened by this like anonymous commenting world of the internet that it's like scary. I hate reading comments of anything.
That's the thing. You go on any website, any Yelp review, anything, and there's always horrible comments. Doesn't matter who you are. You know, you can read 10 great comments about yourself and the one that's bad is the one that you'll believe and stick with you. Yeah. And it doesn't matter how much you try to rationalize, well, there must be an angry person if they're feeling so upset about someone who's talking about movies on television, but it still gets to you. It still gets under your skin. So now I just try to stay away from all of that, really try to keep a hold of who I am and know that I don't need to fix anything about myself.
You are on camera, and I think another kind of maybe false narrative that people just believe is that on-camera journalists like don't do any of the writing. Yeah. They don't write their own words. They have handlers and they just go up and they read the teleprompter. Is that your experience, or what does your job kind of entail?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because in Australia, when you're a host, you also have to be a producer, an editor, a writer, because the industry is so small. You can't possibly just be a host. You wouldn't get any work. Everyone needs to pitch in. So that's always the mentality that I've had. And I've always done everything and learned how to do everything, learned how to edit, learned how to do podcasts, learned how to, any skill I wanted to learn. And so it's difficult sometimes to make people aware that firstly, it was difficult for them to make people believe that I could be on camera when I had been behind the scenes for so many years. It was kind of like you, but you're behind the scenes. Then once I got known for being on camera, it was hard to make them believe that I could do all the other stuff as well. And people watching at home, I'm sure most people who watch TCM think that I just read the teleprompter and someone else is writing my words. But I said to TCM pretty early on in being a host that I wanted to write my own scripts because I love it. I love writing and I love researching about the films, and I want it to all be in my voice. And they have a great team of writers who are wonderful at what they do, but I just said, can I do my own writing? They were totally open to that, and that's been really fun to do. And now I'm like, can I also do some editing? And they're like, oh, what? You want to do that as well? I love all the behind the scenes stuff, so I just want to do more of that. It is strange also when you're talent that you can come on set and you can be in front of a crew of, we've got a lovely crew in Atlanta, so with TCM, so it doesn't happen with them so much, but on a different crew, you could be in front of like 20 people and they can all be talking about you because you're the center focus of what they're doing, the lighting, the camera, but no one actually talks to you. And you want to say like, hi, I'm a person, you can give me feedback. You don't have to be so careful around me. You can tell me exactly what you need. For me, I've always seen a host as just being one of many jobs on a crew, and it does not mean you're any more important than anyone else. You just have a different job, and it's your job actually to make their jobs easier. How can you make the cameraman or camerawoman's job easier? How can you make the editor's job easier? Be prepared, be ready, don't do too many takes. All of that stuff is how I try to approach it.
That's amazing. I think that you are really good at intentionally manifesting things. And, you didn't go to college. You went straight to Sydney. You had this like kind of super focus. And I wanted to know if you had any advice for people who like see maybe your career trajectory or even just that focus that you have on ways that they can tap into that in their own lives and kind of pursue whatever it is that, even if it's in an industry that is super competitive, work towards that goal.
Yeah, I think one of the first big things is learning to trust that inner voice. I'm not religious, so I say it's like my inner wisdom, but if you are religious, maybe it's the voice of God. But it always has guided me and told me exactly what I needed to do. And it was the big reason why I moved to Maine. It said, you need to be in nature, you need to be somewhere beautiful. And so trusting that voice, that's what you want to do and need to do, and that's your deepest desire, number one. And then for me, writing goals, but not just writing. I want to be a host on TCM, but really breaking it down. And so when I discovered TCM, when I moved to LA and I thought I want to be a host, I thought, okay, well, what do you need to be in order to be a host? And I knew it would take up to 10 years. I had to build a reputation as someone who was a classic film expert. I had to learn more about classic films myself. I had to practice my hosting skills and interviewing skills. So I really just tried to break it down to more manageable steps. So then it didn't feel so overwhelming as a goal. And got to the point where someone said to me at the head of a podcast studio where I was doing a classic film podcast, said to me, Alicia, what's your dream job? And I've always believed in telling people your dreams because you never know who will help you.
That's
you say
big.
It like humbly. You don't say, I deserve to be, but you say, I just said, I would love to be on TCM. That's my dream. And he said, well, actually, no, the head of talent, I can put you in touch. And I said, not yet. Can I come back to you in a year or two? Because I knew I wasn't ready and that you have one opportunity. And I wanted to feel ready. So then I spent the next year really working on myself as a host until I got to the point where I felt like I could do an audition and have a chance. So then I approached him again and said, oh, can I get that contact now? And that's how it ended up happening in the end. So just breaking down the goals and trusting yourself and knowing that it will take a while.
Yeah.
Not being afraid of working towards it. I've also been very lucky. I think people have helped me a lot along the way.
Well, I think that like verbalizing whatever it is that you want your dream to be, and then actually knowing the right time for it too. I think that sometimes, opportunities can present themselves that you aren't ready for. Mm-hmm. Just like you taking a pause and going, yes, but
not yet.
Give me a second, and I'll be back.
I know. And it was funny because then when I was ready, I met with the head of talent of TCM, who was lovely. And she, at the time, unbeknownst to me, TCM was working on a streaming service called Filmstruck. And so she was looking for hosts for Filmstruck. So then, it ended up being the right time for that. If it had been a year earlier, it wouldn't have been the right time. So that's how I ended up getting my foot in the door.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Let's back it up a little bit because you moved from Sydney to Los Angeles and you spent 12, 15 years?
10 years.
10 years.
Yep.
What was that transition like for you? And what was it like living in Los Angeles? I would imagine that being, kind of in the center of the entertainment industry, a lot of those pressures that we spoke about earlier probably felt even more weighted.
Yeah, big time. I mean, I remember moving to LA and thinking it all looked like a movie. It looked like everyone looked like an actor or someone that you vaguely recognize from the screen, but you're not sure who they are. It's just everybody moves there to achieve their dreams and mostly to work in the entertainment industry, which at first I found very inspiring because everyone is so ambitious. Then after a while, it really started to drain on me that everyone's always looking for an angle and people definitely want something from you and they want you to help them get to where they want to be. That can be really taxing after a while. And the weight of dreams, you feel it in the air, this expectation that today could be someone's lucky break or they could be there for years and never get a break. It's all about luck and timing. It was great because to be in the center of the film world, I think now it's changed slightly with the pandemic that you might not need to be right there in LA, but back in 2010, that was where you needed to be if you wanted to do anything to do with film. So I decided, I tend to decide these big things about my life really quickly. So I just decided when I was on a trip to Paris that I wanted to move to LA. I came back from that trip. I had my little performance review with work. They said, where do you see yourself in a year's time? I said, in LA. And they were like, what? They said, well, we can't offer you a job there. I said, that's okay. I will figure it out. And so I had to quit everything and go over there with no work prospects. Luckily, I knew people in Australia. So once I arrived, I emailed everyone I knew in Australian television and said, just so you know, I'm here in LA and I thought I could possibly get work as they call like a junket interviewer. So you go to the press junkets where the celebrity sits in the room. It's like speed dating.
I have heard from people that is a very painful experience.
It's a grind. No matter which side you're on. For the star, they have to sit there all day and talk to journalists in 4-minute increments For the journalist, you're walking in, you have 4 minutes, the clock is counting down as you walk in. You don't have much time to build a rapport. You need to get what you need to get. The actor could be tired and over it. You just never know. And it's quite nerve-wracking, and everyone's staring at you and the room is packed. But I knew that was work that I could possibly get for Australian television. And that's how I eventually got my start. Was they said, oh, actually, we need someone to fill in. And then there was a girl in LA who wanted to move back to Australia. So she said, I'll recommend you for the job. Again, women have always paved the way for me. But it was very overwhelming experience to be in such a big city. I was lucky I made great friends who've been so supportive over the years, and to be amongst that world where everyone is just gorgeous. Everyone's waiting to be discovered. It was part of the reason I dyed my hair red, was because there were so many blondes in LA that I wanted to stand out. During those 4-minute interviews, you got to do anything you can to stand out and be memorable in one way or the other.
Oh, that's so interesting. And I mean, your red hair has become like who your personality is on camera. And I wondered if we could talk a little bit about this like caricaturizing of on-air talent, even in the journalism space, which you would think that maybe in the journalism space, it wouldn't be that way.
Yeah.
But I'd love for you to speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's interesting. It became a persona for sure. I changed my hair to stand out a little bit, and I only thought it would be for a little while. And then it became part of my personality. It was how people remembered me, or people recognized me, the red hair and the accent. That's how people remembered me. I remember getting the nickname Red Fury because I was on this YouTube channel that was filled with guys, and they would say stupid things occasionally, and I would get really angry at them. So that I got the nickname Red Fury from that. It also, for me, was a way to, it was kind of like a fake it till you make it thing. Again, just being shy and introverted. Suddenly I was in this situation where you're walking into this room, this hotel room filled like clown car like with all these people. You got 4 minutes. There's this otherworldly looking movie star right there staring at you. And I needed to kind of sum up some kind of confidence. I also started asking for hugs from the stars because I couldn't think of anything scarier than asking to touch a movie star. So I thought that would be a way to get me out of my comfort zone. And again, it was something that people started to remember me by. And I'm not a particularly touchy-feely person, so that's interesting. But I was trying to do all these things to gain confidence. But in the meantime, I can look back now and think I kind of lost myself a little bit in there, both from the comments from people and viewers, and just the pressure you feel of being in LA and being surrounded by a certain type of person. And then also the way that I mean, it was still me, but it was like a heightened version of me that I had to kind of put on in order to do that job. And it can be really hard to shake after a while. It becomes you. And say, for example, social media. Well, I joined social media straight away, tweeting and Instagramming. And to think about it now, there's nothing wrong with selfies, but it's just not me to like do a selfie of myself. I would tell everyone what I'm doing all the time. I love my privacy, but I did all that because I thought that's what you need to do. And I got swept up in the comments and the likes, and I was getting all these followers. And so it was exciting. And the dopamine hit of social media, it can be hard when you're in that rush to take a step back and say, hang on, is this really me? Am I doing all these things because that's who I am? Or am I doing all these things because that's what's expected of me? Yeah. And therefore, am I playing into the same rules about women that we hear time and time again? And am I being a good role model to the girls out there? If I lose a bunch of weight, what does that say to them, that they have to lose weight to be on television? I don't want that.
Calling all small and rurally based business owners. Do you love Urban Exodus and want to help support our continued programming? Become a founding partner of the new Urban Exodus shop. You can reach an engaged customer base who believes in supporting farmers, makers, artisans, and small business owners in rural economies. We are looking for culinary delights, home goods, body goods, art, textiles, adornments, more. We just are really interested to see what you're creating and try to help you get it out there to a larger audience. And we're looking for vendors who make quality products, who pay a living wage, and who run sustainably minded operations. And if this sounds like you and your business and you want to learn more, please click the partnerships page on urbanexodus.com. Let's kind of step forward because you were in LA. You were living this kind of LA life. I think you were starting to feel maybe a little bit like you didn't feel good there per se. You loved what you were doing, but maybe not the place really spoke to you. Then the pandemic hits. What did that feel like for you living in LA? And what motivated you to pick up your life and move to Maine?
Well, I'd always said to my friends, I just want to be in a small town. I'm a small town kind of gal, how I grew up with boots in the mud and out on the farm. But I always said one day. And I never really thought of when I could possibly do that. Even though I was technically working from home, TCM being based in Atlanta means I fly there to film, so I could be based anywhere. I still thought I had to be in LA and be amongst it all. And then when everything shut in LA, I mean, the things that I loved about LA were the film related things, the movie theaters and the people and some of the restaurants, but it's not a particularly beautiful city in and of itself. It's very much of an urban sprawl. So when everything shut down, you're left with thinking, wow, yeah, what is it about LA? Do I like where I'm living? What am I doing? And then I did like everyone did with the pandemic. I didn't want to sit with all the thoughts that I was having, both about the scary world out there and about what was really going on inside me and how anxious I actually was just living in a city. And I mean, I used to just be running from one event to the next. I was always late and I was always eating my car and always stuck in traffic and getting changed in the bathroom, putting makeup on in the car and doing work like it's 5 a.m. in the morning and getting to sleep really late. I mean, it was a nonstop life. And I was doing yoga and meditation, and that was kind of like a band-aid, just sort of holding me together, but it wasn't fixing the real wound that was underneath, which was my stressful life. So I was getting into scrolling on the news, and I realized that from the moment I woke up to the moment I slept in the early stage of the lockdown, I was on a screen. I was looking at the news, and then I was doing yoga from YouTube, and I was doing an Instagram like dance class, and then I was working, and then I was binge watching Netflix, and I was doing Zooms, and I was going for walks and listening to podcasts and trying to optimize every minute by listening to a self-help podcast while I was walking, when what would actually improve my life would be to look around and notice the birds and being quiet. So I started just to feel really anxious and stressed, as many people were. And I was lucky I had my job and I didn't get sick, but I knew I just needed to cut down on all this social media and screen life. So I got off social media, lost my passwords to all my accounts. I got rid of a lot of streaming services. I started getting the newspaper instead of the news, and just really tried to pare down the screens from my life and try to have more quiet moments where it was no music, where I could just sit and think and hear what thoughts came up. And what came up was, you're incredibly stressed. This is not a sustainable life. You love what you do, but you need to be somewhere else, and you need to be in nature, which was surprising to me that's what I got was, okay, you need to be somewhere beautiful. Yeah. And I'd come to Maine in 2019 with a friend who grew up in Maine and good friends in LA. And he always said to me, you would love Maine. You love the outdoors. You love the weather. You like being cozy. So finally I went with him in October 2019 and I loved it. And then I just drove through a small town, didn't even stop in this particular town, just drove through. And I was like, I love this place. This is where I want to be. Then that got heightened during the lockdown when I'm locked in my tiny apartment in LA. It's 115 degrees Fahrenheit, the huge heat wave. There's smoke in the air from all the horrible wildfires. Everything's shut. I just went, I got to try. I wonder if work would be okay with me working from over there. And luckily they could tell that I was sort of at my wit's end and I needed to do something to change my life. And they were so supportive. I'm very grateful for TCM. Working with them feels like me because it's all about classic films and that's who I really am. And so they said, yeah, you can work from Maine. And so I packed up everything, fit as much as I could in my tiny car, put my cat in her backseat carrier, and drove across the country all the way to Maine and stayed in this small town in an Airbnb. And within 3 days, I was like, I have to make this permanent. This is where I need to be.
That's amazing. You were able to buy your first home.
Yeah.
Which is a really big accomplishment. And you were smart in that you bought almost right away.
I had to. I knew that the prices were going up and up with the pandemic. And I could see, because I was watching the real estate sites, and I could see how quickly the houses were being snapped up. And it's cheaper mortgage here than I was paying rent in LA. So I thought I should just buy something. And I just had to jump on this house as soon as I saw it.
So you move to this small town in Maine. You're still working your job remotely, but it's the pandemic. Was that a very isolating time for you? How did you make inroads? You seem to me like you're really great at figuring out what, obviously you make it to LA and you figure out,
I don't know.
how do I make this work? How have you figured out building inroads and making connections in a small community, especially during a pandemic where, it's a much more isolating time and people are maybe a little bit more leery of outsiders even?
Yeah, that's what all my friends said to me. They said, how are you going to make friends? Firstly, being an adult and making friends is tough. Secondly, if you're not a parent, you don't have that in with kids, that's tough. Don't have a partner, didn't know anyone, and a pandemic. And I don't know, it's just I'll be fine. I'm lucky that I'm a bit of a loner anyway. I like my own company. I like being alone against the introvert thing. It's how I kind of charge up. So I knew I would be fine, even if I didn't know anyone. Firstly, I bought your book, which was really helpful and taught me things like wave at people when they drive past and say hello in the street and say hi to your neighbors and introduce yourself. And so I thought, okay, I need to be really friendly and I need to talk to people and everyone was so nice here. I don't think I'll ever be seen as a Mainer or a local, but I think people in this town, because so many people have come from elsewhere, they go, oh yeah, I moved here 15 years ago, or I moved here 5 years ago, that people are a little bit more open than they may be in other towns to new people coming because they've done it themselves. So I was talking to the owner of a local cafe and she had come from California and I was, talking to her and she said, oh, here's another woman who just moved over from California. She's like, this is Elizabeth. And Elizabeth was like, oh, I just moved from LA. I was like, me too. And became friends. And then I was working with a crew in Portland shooting for TCM. And one of the girls there was like, oh, I know some people up where you are. I'll introduce you. I was like, yes, please. And I also did a pottery class just so I could go and do something every week and be around people and talk to them. And then things like the dinner party, that was through friends who were visiting and they knew people. And so it just sort of slowly happened. And luckily, thankfully, people like you are so friendly. And you said straight away, here's my number and let's go for a hike. And that is I'm so grateful for that everyone has been that way, been so friendly and let's catch up. Let's have coffee. Let's do this. Let's do that. It's been really nice. Now I think I'm more social here than I was in LA.
Well, that's what I was going to ask because, I've interviewed so many people for this project and I feel like a lot of them say, oh, actually, you think that if you're moving to a small town that your social life will get smaller or, less exciting. But a lot of people have said, oh, actually, it feels much richer. I have a much more meaningful friendships with maybe a smaller amount of people.
Yes.
But we make time for one another.
Exactly. And something you said in your book, which is really true, which I find really valuable that you don't do in LA, is be friends with people from all different generations, different ages. And I think especially when it comes to women, women, younger women and older women are placed in competition so often that cuts out that really important tie of being able to talk to older women and get wisdom and life experience and all of that. So it's been nice to be around different kinds of people. It's also been interesting and quite confronting to be around people from completely different political backgrounds because LA is very liberal and you kind of just expect that everyone is liberal. And here, and you had mentioned it in your book, and I kept that in mind of the kind of quick to lend a hand, slow to judge. And so I've been able to hold the conflicting idea in my head that someone can be really nice and have completely different ideals and political background to me. And just don't talk politics, right?
Yeah.
But they can still be genuine and sweet people.
Yeah. And I think we've kind of gotten to a place in like politics and mainstream like media and news where like it's like pick a side, you know? And in some ways that's really alienated people from one another.
Exactly.
And in a small town, like you might need your neighbor down the road and maybe you don't go to the same church and maybe you don't vote for the same people, but like, can you meet on other things?
Yeah.
If you could transport yourself back into the early days of your career, is there any advice you would have wished you could impart on yourself back then?
Yeah, I think I would have said, like, you're enough as you are. You don't need to change yourself. You don't need to be anything else. And what makes you unique makes you special. Because I've been thinking about it, the way that we get so many comments about women on camera and some of us, and I've caught myself doing that too, being like, oh, her voice is annoying. We end up just smoothing down anyone's sharpness and edginess and things that make them interesting. And just so women just fade in the background. Just don't be noticeable. Don't be anything like outwardly interesting. You should just fade into the background. And so I was definitely caught myself at one point looking down and being like, who am I? I'm wearing clothes that I would never wear. I've got a spray tan and I'm pale. I've got red hair. At one point, it was suggested to me I should do more of an American accent because Australian accent's hard to understand sometimes for some people. And I was just like, I don't know who this person is anymore. Okay. So I wish I would have held on to that earlier and just sort of stuck with that from the beginning, but it can be difficult.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's especially difficult because not only is it a male dominated industry, it's also usually a male-led industry.
Mm-hmm.
I wondered if you had any advice for people in any industry, quite honestly, not people, women in particular, on ways to take up space and to get their work noticed.
Yeah, I think really for me, it's been helpful to have women as friends and allies. And I think we are set up as being competition for each other so often that there's one spot for a woman. So it's you or it's her, and she's getting all the work and you're not. And so I've always tried to fight against that and become allies with women, because you need the shoulder to cry on, you need the vent, and you need women to help rise the tide, rises all boats, that kind of thing. One win for a woman is another win for another woman. So that's been the main thing for me, is just have that support network and people you can check in with when you go, am I crazy? Is this, is he taking all the credit for my work, or should I be louder?
Yeah.
And just have someone there, lots of women there to help with you and to understand what you're going through. And what's been wonderful at TCM is that it's a female-led business, which is really rare. The CEO, general manager, the head of talent, like the producers, the directors, all women. Like they outnumber the men. And so it's been such a different experience for me. And women just taking up space, I think, is so important. Just not let yourself be dulled, your shine be dulled.
Yeah.
And to speak up and not worry about all the labels you'll get for being difficult or being too annoying or too this, too that. They're always too something.
What are your favorite aspects now of small town living? And what, if anything, do you find challenging?
Well, it was challenging when I first moved, that the lack of modern conveniences that I got so used to in LA. No Postmates, no Uber. You'd look up shops and you go, oh, that's an hour and a half away. Okay. And we look up another shop. Oh, that's not even in Maine. Okay.
Yeah.
Which has turned into a good thing because it's forced me to cook more at home, which now I'm really enjoying, which I never did in the past because I would just grab something on my way here, there, and everywhere. And it's also made me realize the value in shopping locally, giving back to the community. So another thing I did was stop buying anything from Amazon and just try to get it in person as much as I can. that was a challenge. And I think also just reminding yourself, and again, you mentioned this in your book, if you have a problem with someone, to deal with it directly to them, not gossip or talk behind anyone's back, because it's a small town and it'll get back to them. And you need to have good relationships with everyone, a good reputation in the small town. And for me, being a natural introvert, I've had to also be like, okay, you got to get out there and you got to like talk to people and, got to be friendly. You don't want to be seen as that girl from LA who thinks she's better than everyone else. The thing that I love about a small town is the fact that everyone does have your back. Like everyone knows your business, but everybody also is there and willing to help, and everyone's watching out for you. So people will notice if you're unwell or if you need help, or if you like haven't raked your leaves, like people will tell you, like they're very open to tell you exactly what they think, but they also are very helpful and ready to lend a hand. And that's been a new experience for me coming from LA, where I didn't even know my neighbors.
Have you felt a shift mentally or physically or emotionally since moving and leaving city life behind?
Yeah, absolutely. Now I can't imagine myself living in a city again, or city, especially LA. Coming here, I've been able to reconnect myself in a way that I haven't since, I probably was a teenager. I've started to figure out who I really am when everything's taken away. People here do not care that I'm on television. They go, oh, that's cool, interesting, but they are not trying to get anything from you. They're not overly impressed by what you do. People hardly wear makeup. Everyone wears functional clothes rather than fashion. And so to be able to let go of all of that stuff, that persona that I had built up, it's made me able to find out again who I truly am. And I've felt a level of contentment that I never thought was possible. Just a genuine like level of contentment every day. Sometimes I'll be excited like a kid on Christmas, and I'll think, why am I excited? There's nothing coming up that I'm excited about. It's like, oh, I'm just excited about life. I'm excited about living here. And so that's been such a huge shift. The hard thing for me now is being able to then switch back to TV, Alicia, when I need to, and suddenly be in the makeup chair and getting all that done, and being this wardrobe and styling, and being on set with a camera pointing at me when I live such a quiet life outside of it. I'm sure people watching would never know that I have such a quiet life now, that I go for walks in the forest and don't listen to any music or podcasts. I just listen to the trees. Most of the time I'm just in, sweatpants at home. And so I think for me now, the challenge is, how do I continue doing what I love doing? TCM is the dream job for me. I love it with all my heart, but not lose myself and not rely on that persona again. And so recently I'm switching my hair back to my natural blonde, slowly but surely, and trying to find out who I really am and how I can be that authentic on camera.
I mean, it seems like you have a very real connection with your intuition and who you are. Do you feel like moving here, all of a sudden the curtain has been pulled back and there it is again?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like the world went on mute. All the noise got turned down, all that constant rushing and traffic and social media and just the noise of city life. It just all got switched down, and suddenly I was able to think clearly. And I go on these walks and I just come up with these ideas, or I have these big epiphanies about my life. And that's been great to be able to start to process all that.
So now you work remotely. And what does your production schedule look like? And how do you balance work life and home life? Because that can be a real transition to all of a sudden be, working from home without your colleagues close by.
Yeah. I was always sort of working from home, but in LA, you're very much surrounded by other people. And there's a lot of people who work at TCM who live in LA as well. So now I'm like very remote working. And I think things like having a dedicated office really helps. Trying to keep regular hours or a routine. I always go for a walk in the morning, and then I will get a coffee and I'll sit down and I'll try to work for a few hours. I do the little like Pomodoro method where you put the timer on for 25 minutes and you work intensely on one task, 25 minutes. Then the bell rings and you have a 5-minute break, get up and walk around, maybe do a little dance.
Oh my gosh. I'm like, I'm going to do this. This is great.
And then come back and sit down for another 25 minutes. And that I find more manageable to think, well, I'll do 4 of those rather than I'll do 2 hours of work.
Yeah.
And also gets you up and moving because it's not good to sit down all day. But mainly my schedule is I have 2 months at home where I get my assignments, my list of films that I'll be introducing, and we get them months in advance. So right now I'm watching a lot of Christmas movies, and which is so fun. And then I'll be into January 2022, which seems crazy. So I'll get my list, I'll watch the films, I'll do all the research, and I'll write the scripts. And I'm such a list maker and such an organized person that I break it down to, okay, Monday I'll write these 3 scripts. Tuesday, I'll write those 3 scripts and I'll watch this film. And so I really try to manage my time. Each script takes about an hour to write, but it takes longer if you watch the film. If it's one I haven't seen for a little while, I always try to rewatch it and do about an hour worth of research as well. So that's pretty much my days. And then once every 2 months, I fly to Atlanta for 3 days or 2 days of shooting. And I do like 60 scripts in a day, wow, which is a lot of talking.
That's a ringer.
Yeah. So you're just standing in your one position and doing one after the other for like 8 hours, just me. And so I'll do that. There'll be like an intense 2 days, and then I come back home and then I start it again.
Nice.
Yeah. So it's a good schedule.
I just wanted to give an enormous thank you to all of you listeners who have made contributions toward the production of this podcast. Every season, I spend about 100 hours preparing, writing, editing, interviewing, and distributing the podcast. And I have hard costs for my editor and for those hosting fees. And it really means so much to me that you find enough meaning and value in this podcast to pledge your support and to keep it going. And if you haven't had a chance to contribute, we've made it really easy for you. Just click the support button on the top of Urban Exodus website and pledge any amount that you like. Thank you again. I really couldn't continue to do this work without you. How has your family and friends kind of responded to your move? Were they surprised? Are they excited for you? I mean, obviously, Maine is very far from Australia.
Yes, very far.
I don't think you could get maybe further.
I know. I really moved far away. I'm sure they think I'm crazy. They thought I was crazy when I moved to LA and didn't know anyone. And then they're like, wait, you're moving to Maine? And, you know, my mom always wants the best for me. So she's always like, but what are you going to do? Like, what about this? And what about this? And practical things that I should consider. But I'm always like, I'll figure it out. And then I do. And so now they see how happy I am here, and I've been able to buy a home and find a good community. And so now they're really, they think it's such a good move. And my mom is really happy. I mean, even though I turned 40, so I'm definitely adult. She's so happy that I live in a town that's really safe and that doesn't have many cases of COVID. She's like, okay, I know you're okay over there. Yeah. Don't have to worry about you as much as she worried when I was in LA. So I think they're really happy for me, but they also like, when are you going to come back to Australia? Like, as soon as I can. But it's been difficult there too with coronavirus, getting back to Australia. So hopefully next year.
You are so good at manifesting and taking risks. And I wondered, like, what you tap into. What is that piece of you that just, I think that a lot of people feel really scared to make big leaps in their life. And sometimes it's circumstantial, like they can't. And other times it isn't. It's like, it's just, they're trapped by stuff or by golden handcuffs of a job or things like that. What advice would you give them on ways to just like jump into it and believe in yourself and take a risk?
I was obviously, I've been really privileged and I've been able to move around, and I don't have a partner or kids to consider. You know, moving from Australia to US is much easier than moving from other countries to the US. But for me, it was always like, okay, it's scarier to stay and keep doing the same thing and possibly regret never trying than to go and try, and I could always come back. And people always said to me, what are you going to do in LA? Like LA is a really tough town. How are you going to survive? How are you going to pay rent? Because also I had a visa that only permitted me to work on television. I couldn't get a job in a bar or a restaurant. So I could only make money if I was working on television. And I just thought, well, I can always come back. And I guess I never see it as being a failure if I've tried it. You always learn from it, no matter how it turns out, if it's good or bad. It's always a chance to learn something. And I don't think there's really any mistakes you can make because you can just try. If I went back to Australia, I wouldn't see it as a failure. I would have seen it as a failure if I never tried. And I always wondered.
That's part of the journey. Like it's a lesson, right? I think that even just like relabeling that word, not using that word. Oh, well, I went through this whole process and it was a learning experience that moved me into this
terrible relationship. It was a learning experience, not a failure.
Yeah, exactly.
It always teaches you something.
Yeah, it changes your perspective a little bit.
Yeah.
Makes you braver to step into the next thing because that's what life is. It's just a series of choices.
And I could have moved here and hated it, but at least I would have known that. And I thought, I can always go back to LA. I mean, my friends are going to be there. I can always get another apartment. That's fine. I just had to give it a go. And I'm so glad I did.
What advice would you give to people who are maybe listening to this in the city right now? And they're like, oh, you're living my dream life. I want to move to the country, but like, I feel like I can't. What advice would you give them on ways to plan for their move and find the right community that really fits for them?
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm just so impulsive that I was like, I'm moving here. And everyone's like, what? And I didn't know that much about the town or about the people or anything except what the research I could do on the internet. And I only had savings because of COVID. I mean, because I was forced to not spend any money, I had savings from that. But I think you just have to try and see if you can get a good sense of the place. Like I said, I'd just driven through, but if it hadn't been for the pandemic and I wanted to move out here, I would have come back several times. I would have come back in the winter and seen how that was because everyone told me, oh, the snow is terrible and you'll hate the winter. And I didn't. I loved it. But I would have come back in the winter. I would have come back or maybe rented something long term. I think just giving it a try and seeing if it fits. And again, there's no mistakes. If you don't like that one place, you could try another. I was also thinking maybe the Hudson Valley, upstate New York. But it was because I couldn't really travel in COVID that I thought I'd rather move to a place that I've driven through than a place that I've never driven through, which is the Hudson Valley.
What was the drive across the country like?
Oh, so interesting. Another silly thing about me is I always loved things to feel cinematic. And people would say, why don't you fly? And you can always come back and get your car if you know you're going to stay there. And I said, but I love the idea of driving off to the sunset. Driving across the country. It's like a new chapter. Like putting distance, like physical distance between one part of my life and the next. And that feels like it was more interesting to me than just flying over.
Yeah. Before we started recording, you just went and did a bunch of recordings for your job. And what that homecoming is like now coming back to Maine versus flying back to LA. I'd love it for you to talk a little bit about that.
It really surprised me because I love to travel. I always have. And I was so excited about going to the UK recently. There's another show that I do that's a travel show. And so we get to go to the locations of films and it's really fun and a great crew that I travel with. But it surprised me that once I was over there, I was like, I really miss Maine. I was texting a friend here being like, have the leaves changed yet? I don't want to miss the leaves change because it's so beautiful here in fall. And I was thinking about how in the past I would be excited to go back to LA just because I was excited to go to my own bed, have my things, be with my cat. But I wasn't like, yay, I'm excited to go back to LA, like specifically. And this time I couldn't wait to get back to Maine. And like we were saying before we recorded, and you mentioned that's a real signifier of a home where you love everything about the place. And it really does feel like home. And it felt like home so quickly. And that surprised me. Again, my friends are like, you bought a house within how many months of like staying there? You don't want to rent for a while. You haven't even been through a winter. And I was like, no, I love it. This feels like home. And it does. So now it's kind of ruined traveling for me because now I don't want to go anywhere.
Yeah.
I just want to stay here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
2 more questions for you. The first question is one that I get a lot of questions from single people who are living in cities and wanting to move, but feeling like they want to like meet a partner or something before they make that move. I would love for you to just share what your experience is like making that move as a single person and any words of encouragement to them on like not waiting for the right person to come around.
Yeah, that was another concern of all my friends was like, how are you going to meet someone, you know, when you're over in a small town and there's less people and a lot of people are married, and that's true. I am lucky in some ways that I decided very early on in my life I didn't want to get married or have kids. Just nothing that appealed to me. I love kids, just didn't want my own. So I don't have that timeline that I see a lot of my friends stressing about, you know, that they have to find someone within a particular time. If you want to have a baby, it's so much pressure. So I didn't have that aspect of it. And I knew I was also okay by myself. But I just had a feeling that I would be fine and that I would meet someone over here. And I didn't want that to stop me from moving over here. I also realized how many times I've settled just to be with someone, to be in a relationship rather than being okay by myself. And I wanted to feel like I was truly fine by myself. And I think that's when you meet someone that is right for you, when you're a whole person and not looking for someone just to fill the void. And so I have a feeling it'll happen. I don't know how. I don't like dating apps, so I don't ever do that. But your book, again, just going to keep plugging your book. It was very encouraging because you had mentioned how people had moved here single and that they'd met people and that it was possible. I don't think it's impossible. And that, you know, maybe someone gets divorced and then you end up with someone's friend and it's a small town. So you it happens like that.
That's how it happens. And honestly, I feel like you get to know people better in the country or in rural spaces because there are fewer people. So, you know, you're in the city and everybody's just swiping. And there are endless possibilities. And like here you can go, I was on my sister's Tinder. I like looking at dating apps, even though I got married before dating apps really were a thing.
Yes.
And
they're definitely a thing in the city and that's fine, but I never liked them.
No.
I was always scared of them.
But you can go to the end of Tinder here in 7 swipes.
And it's like most people are an hour away.
Exactly.
3 hours away.
Yeah. It does change things. Like all of a sudden, you know, you might go out in the city on a date with someone and you write them off for one thing. You know, it's like, oh, he did something weird with his teeth or this was odd. But here you just you have to put a little bit more investment in, a little bit more time.
I feel like you become friends with people.
Yeah.
And then it could naturally happen from that.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, my friends they want me to be happy and they want me to be with someone. But I'm like, I just have a feeling it'll happen.
Yeah.
In time when it's right.
Yeah. That's awesome. I mean, that's how you've kind of lived your whole life. So, and I think that's a perspective that I hope that a lot of people listening can grab onto and feel that too, because I feel like our society is go, 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 go. You have to do this and you have to do that. And all before this timeline. And it's really unhealthy.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we look at the idea of success in the wrong way. We look at it as, you know, money and accomplishments, and people say, you're so successful. And it's like, well, maybe for me, because I achieved my goal, I was successful. But actually, I think success is just being happy, being content at the end of the day. That's it.
Yeah, that is so true. I'd love for you to, I know that we've talked about this before, but kind of share what your next vision is. This was your dream job. And I know that there's this other dream that you have in your mind that you want to manifest.
Yeah, funny enough, years ago, I thought I really would love to own a movie theater. And a lot of movie lovers say that, love to own a movie theater. But I remember saying, I want to own a movie theater in a small town. I just thought that would be really wonderful to be part of a community and to be part of people's movie memories and get to know the people who come into the theater and just be a real important part of the town. And in 2019, when I came here with a friend, we went past this old movie theater not far from where I live now, and it was for sale. And my friend, he called up the real estate agent, talked about it, and I remember being like, oh, wouldn't that be wonderful? Since then, since moving here, I've met the owners and they're really lovely, and I've talked to them about the possibility of figuring out a way to buy and run a movie theater. And I'm still going through the process. I am thinking about setting up a nonprofit in order to, because that's unfortunately these days, it's really hard to run an independent movie theater unless you're a nonprofit. But what would be wonderful is then you get the community involved in helping to keep the theater going. It was built in 1912, so it's a very valuable part of that town. I think maybe with some of the connections I've made over the years, that could be of value to that theater. And then I could surround myself with locals who also want this vision to happen and to play classic films. I mean, that would be wonderful. So that's my next dream. And again, it's one that is very ill-advised to buy a movie theater, especially right now with COVID and streaming services. But hey, I've never let that stop me before.
Yeah.
So.
And I think that there is, even with everything that COVID has done, there's kind of like this want and need to like return to like, I'm not going to say a simpler time. That's like overly like idealistic, but that like community element, like people miss those community pieces.
Those
and
communal experiences.
Yeah.
I think so. I'd like to hold on to the fact that I think community theaters are going to be even more important down the road because there'll be a place for people to come and congregate. You know, without having a lot of religion and things like that, town squares, people don't have a place to get together.
Yeah.
And that would be great to be part of that. So we'll see.
Awesome.
See what's next. Stay tuned.
Well, thank you so much, Alicia, for being on the podcast. I am so glad that I met you at that dinner party.
Yeah, I'm so glad I met you.
And that you are a new member of our Maine community here. And
thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for your book.
Of course. Thank you for listening to my conversation with Alicia Malone. She is such an inspiration, not only because of the joy and energy with which she approaches following her dreams, but the life that she has built for herself on her own. It feels much like a fairy tale ending, finding that place to call home after decades of forging a career path in big cities. Returning to small town living has allowed her to reconnect with happy memories of her childhood. It has also allowed her to reconnect to her true, authentic self. Alicia took her physical move as an opportunity to prioritize her mental health and well-being. It is all too easy to get caught up in the busy hamster wheel of living in a metropolis. I think that's a lot of what Urban Exodus is about, not just a physical shift towards a natural world, but also one that encompasses more of a natural shift within. Listening to that own inner voice that you have and prioritizing the things that are truly fulfilling in your life. You can find photos from my visit with Alicia and links to her work and social media on the blog by visiting urbanexodus.com. Hi friends, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Urban Exodus podcast. Urban Exodus is a labor of love and is only made possible by listener support. I do this work because the people I meet through this project give me energy and hope for the future. My mission is to promote the work of people manifesting good in the world. We are living in a time where there's an overwhelming feeling of dread, and I want this project to encourage people to be proactive and work towards finding creative solutions for both their individual happiness and our collective experience. You can support this work by clicking the support button at the top of urbanexodus.com, by buying an ad spot in an upcoming episode, by shopping our online store, or taking an in-person or online course through our workshops at How Hill Farm. We are also slowly getting our Patreon page together, and we'll be adding bonus features and other content there. So check out patreon.com/Urban Exodus to learn more. Another way to support is by giving us a 5-star rating on iTunes and recommending Urban Exodus to your friends. Thank you again for helping me continue to do this work. I couldn't do it without all of you. You can find Urban Exodus on Instagram and Facebook at The Urban Exodus. To read more in-depth features on folks who ditched the city and went country, visit urbanexodus.com. Until next time, I'm Alyssa Hessler, and this is The Urban Exodus.